Number 8. Estranged Brothers. In April 2023, a tragic and horrifying incident took place in Utah when a 66-year-old man from California named Jeffrey Roberts ambushed and killed his estranged brother, 65-year-old Scott Roberts, on Scott's doorstep in North Ogden. He also shot Scott's wife, Jody Roberts, and set the couple's house on fire while he was there. The incident was later linked to a family issue, but the exact circumstances are still under investigation. Jeffrey Roberts traveled a significant distance, 750 miles to be exact, from his home in Long Beach in order to confront his brother. When police got to the quiet neighborhood address, he opened fire on them as well. The standoff resulted in his own death. The Weber County Attorney's Office released disturbing footage from a nearby Ring doorbell camera and police body cameras, shedding some much-needed light on the tragic events of April 27th. Scott and Jody's daughter, Kelsey Turner, revealed that her dad had acted heroically that day, begging her mother to flee during the confrontation, ultimately saving her life. The fire that Jeffrey started left Jody without any clothes or personal belongings, and a majority of their home was destroyed as a result. The chilling Ring doorbell camera footage captured the initial encounter between the two brothers. Jeffrey calmly approached Scott's front door while Scott was having a nice dinner with Jody. There was a brief exchange between them before Jeffrey suddenly took out a weapon from his hoodie pocket and started firing, abruptly forcing his way into the home. Minutes later, the camera reactivated as Jeffrey came back around with a pump-action shotgun, as well as a duffel bag filled with hundreds of rounds of ammunition. Police got to the scene not long after, and a fire alarm sounded off as Jeffrey set fire to the home. Bullet holes were also clearly visible on the porch pillars. Jeffrey then rushed out of the property, firing his handgun. This prompted a barrage of shots in response from the police that ended the man's life. Bodycam footage from the aftermath showed flames engulfing the house, preventing immediate access to help Jody. Bullets from the shootout also damaged a few neighboring residences. Brandon Miles from the Weber County Attorney's Office claimed that the incident stemmed from a heated family issue, with investigations possibly extending all the way to California, where Jeffrey Roberts lived. It remains unclear how he was able to acquire the weapons and ammunition. While Jody Roberts was discharged from the hospital, their home was declared uninhabitable thanks to the fire. No additional suspects were being pursued in the case as of the last update. In the wake of this tragedy, a GoFundMe campaign set up by Kelsey Turner received overwhelming support, raising well over $37,000 to assist Jody and her family. Tributes and messages of support flooded in, underscoring the loss of Scott Roberts, who was remembered as an incredible colleague, mentor, and friend by every person who knew him. Number 7. Timothy Jones Jr. In a disturbing case, the Supreme Court has upheld the conviction and death sentence of a man named Timothy Jones Jr. The South Carolina father committed the unthinkably horrific act of murdering his 5 children back in 2014. The verdict was officially handed down in June 2019 after a trial that fully revealed the disturbing details of the crime. Jones attacked 1 child and strangled the other 4. He was found guilty of killing his 5 kids, who ranged in ages from 1 to 8 years old, using his own hands. After thoughtlessly taking their lives in the family's Lexington home, he left on a gruesome journey. He drove around the southeastern United States with the bodies of his children in the car for an agonizing 9 days before deciding to dispose of them on the side of an Alabama dirt road. Their bodies had been placed inside garbage bags. During the trial, Jones's lawyer argued that the rampage was due to his client's shattered grasp on reality, brought on by his wife Amber's cheating. Jones's wife had an affair with their 19-year-old neighbor after she started to feel suffocated by her husband's outrageous demands. His lawyer also pointed to Jones's struggles with schizophrenia, drug use, and a failing marriage as major contributing factors to his actions. Meanwhile, prosecutors portrayed him as an evil, abusive father who used excessive physical activity like push-ups and jumping jacks as punishment for his children. Prosecutors also presented a series of disturbing lists that were allegedly written by Jones, outlining gruesome instructions on how to mutilate bodies. Jones later pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, but the evidence stacked against him was overwhelming. He was arrested in Mississippi during a drunk driving checkpoint where police picked up on a putrid odor they described as the smell of death. After searching his vehicle, they found chemicals, blood, maggots, and the kid's clothing. In 2021, Jones appealed his conviction and death sentence, with his primary argument centering on the assertion that a prosecutor unfairly influenced the original jury by showing them disturbing photographs of the deceased children. This tactic, he argued, had the aim of swaying the jury toward giving him a death sentence. Additional points of contention in the appeal revolved around issues such as juror qualifications, a related jury instruction, questioning potential jurors, and evidentiary rulings made during both the guilt and sentencing phases of the trial. The Supreme Court took the appeal in November 2021 and subsequently made its decision, which was filed on March 29, 2023. The court's ruling upheld the original sentencing, meaning that Timothy Jones Jr. will continue to serve out his death sentence for the tragic and brutal murder of his 5 innocent children. Number 6. Doris Campos. A horrific incident unfolded in San Antonio, Texas in June 2023. A 68-year-old Doris Campos was located inside a Southside home with the lifeless bodies of 2 other women. Campos has since been accused of at least one of these deaths and is now facing serious murder charges for the death of her sister, 64-year-old Patricia Sauceda. Another woman, 72-year-old Linda Bland, was the other victim discovered dead alongside them in the home. The grim discovery was made by Bland's daughter late one Saturday night, as outlined in an arrest warrant affidavit. She'd gone to her mother's home in the 2100 block of E. Chavanneau Road to deliver some tobacco. But after arriving at the front door, she heard Campos, her aunt, frantically shouting, "She's on the floor." In her desperate attempt to go into the house, Bland's daughter broke through the glass on the front door. Once inside, she saw Campos sitting on the floor. Tragically, Bland and Sauceda were also dead nearby. It was disturbingly noted in the affidavit that the bodies seemed to have been sitting in the house for several days before their discovery. Campos, upon the arrival of an emergency medical professional, confessed to the fatal shooting of her sister. Sauceda was discovered lying on a bed with a gunshot wound in her chest. Campos had placed the .22 caliber gun that she used in the shooting inside a plastic bag right underneath the bed. Despite these shocking revelations, investigators from the Bexar County Sheriff's Office didn't notice any apparent signs of foul play or trauma on Linda Bland's body. The Bexar County Medical Examiner's Office indicated that an autopsy report was still pending, and her exact cause of death was still undetermined at that time. After the discovery, Campos was taken to a hospital after complaining of shortness of breath. And after receiving medical attention, she was later booked into the Bexar County Jail, where her bond was set at $250,000. Number 5. Wiley S. McKenzie. In February 2020, a tragic incident unfolded in Largo, Florida, as a man was taken into police custody and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder for allegedly murdering his mother and stepsister using a machete. The events took place right before 6:30 p.m. at a home on the 800 block of 3rd Avenue Southwest. Police responded to a distress call placed from a man who reported that his son was flying off the handle, attacking 2 family members with a knife. After arriving at the scene, officers met 49-year-old Wiley S. McKenzie, whom they took into custody. Inside the home, they made the grim discovery of McKenzie's mom, who was already deceased, and his stepsister, who was also critically wounded. The hurt stepsister was immediately rushed to the hospital, but tragically succumbed to her injuries a short time after. The incident came from a petty argument over money, during which McKenzie allegedly armed himself with a machete and went into the bedroom where his mother and stepsister were waiting. That's when he brutally attacked both of them with the weapon. McKenzie's father tried to intervene and stop the attack, but was ultimately unsuccessful. Eventually, though, he managed to leave the property with enough time to call 911 for help, as the situation escalated way beyond his control. To protect the privacy of the deceased victims and their families, police refused to reveal their names due to the confidentiality provisions of Marsy's law. After his arrest, Wiley S. McKenzie was sent to the Pinellas County Jail, where he was held without bail, facing serious charges related to the horrific double homicide. But it's now 2023, and there's been no recent updates on the case. So unfortunately, it's unclear what punishment McKenzie was handed. Number 4. Roby Sevilla. A tragic and disturbing incident took place in Pine Hills, Orange County back in August 2023. It led to the arrest of Roby Sevilla, a 37-year-old man who now faces some pretty serious charges, including murder and assault. The incident went down at the family's home on Charles Street, resulting in the shooting and death of one sister and severe injuries to another individual. At around 10:30 a.m. on a Wednesday, deputies responded to the scene after Sevilla himself called 911, confessing to the crime. According to the arrest report, Sevilla's rage was supposedly triggered by a fight over an OUC power bill. When he couldn't take it anymore, he grabbed a firearm from his bedroom and then forcibly entered another room in the house where his sisters were located. Once inside, he reportedly physically assaulted both of them, using the gun as his weapon. Tragically, during the altercation, when one of his sisters, Gabriel Brown, tried to stand up for herself, Sevilla immediately shot her in the head and left the room quickly. The surviving sister was quickly transported to the hospital with multiple head injuries that will most likely result in permanent disfigurement, according to the arrest report. The investigating detective revealed that Sevilla admitted to the crime, citing ongoing issues with his sisters as a contributing factor. Also, court documents shed some light on a long-standing family dispute related to the house where the shooting happened. When their mother passed away, she left the property to all 3 siblings, so splitting the assets had always been a sore point in their relationship. 3 years before, Sevilla and the surviving sister took legal action against Brown since they wanted to sell the house while Brown planned to retain ownership. This legal matter had still yet to be resolved at the time of the incident. Additionally, in July, court records indicated that the sister who lost her life had been trying to buy out her sibling's share of the house, adding yet another layer of complexity to the ongoing family conflict. Roby Sevilla now finds himself inside an Orange County jail cell, facing charges of murdering one sister and causing severe harm to the other. This deeply distressing event has not only caused the loss of a family member, but has also left lasting physical and emotional scars on the few survivors. Number 3. Christy Sheets. In June 2016, a terrible incident unfolded in Katy, Texas, when 42-year-old Christy Sheets shot and killed her 2 young daughters, 22-year-old Deella and 17-year-old Madison, during a family meeting inside their home. Her husband, Jason Sheets, escaped the attack unharmed. When officers arrived at the scene, Christy Sheets refused to give up her weapon. Because of this, she was subsequently shot and killed by law enforcement, since she posed a considerable threat. Fort Bend County Sheriff Troy Nels revealed that Christy had a long history of depression and attempts of trying to take her life. Her marriage to Jason was also on the brink of divorce. Their relationship had been rocky since 2012, after the passing of Christy's grandfather, who'd been like a father to her growing up and practically raised her. The firearm used in the tragedy had even been handed down to her from him. Jason Sheets informed investigators that he initially thought his wife called their daughters together to announce their divorce, but shockingly instead she revealed the gun to them. She spared Jason's life but forced him to watch the nightmarish onslaught. Afterward, Sheriff Nels told NBC News that he believed Christy wanted Jason to suffer deeply. Despite having many opportunities, Christy Sheets chose not to physically hurt her husband. Nels explained that she knew how strongly he cared for their daughters and wanted him to experience the pain of losing them. The situation escalated in the days before the shooting, when Christy fought with her eldest daughter Deella, who was about to get married. Christy wanted to ground her, a decision Jason disagreed with, considering it entirely inappropriate for their adult daughter. This argument happened to be the tipping point for Christy. She had a history of struggling with mental health. She had even been admitted to a private facility 3 times in the past. Christy was also going to therapy regularly and was prescribed her condition. At the time of the incident, she was unemployed, although her LinkedIn page indicated that she worked as a business manager for a tattoo removal clinic in Houston. According to Jason, she also battled alcoholism, and their marriage experienced several separations, despite lasting over 2 decades long. Authorities reported that they were investigating Jason's claim that his wife had been denied a license to carry permit in Texas due to her mental health history. Sheriff Nels conveyed that Jason, though devastated, didn't want to speak publicly about the tragedy, but allowed the sheriff's department to share a few details from their interview. While speaking with the police, Jason apparently expressed that Christy had accomplished her one goal of making him suffer. Number 2. Carlson. Carlson, the man who was previously convicted of murdering his son back in 2008 for insurance money, was sentenced to serve life in prison without the possibility of parole in 2020 for the murder of his first wife, Christina Carlson. This sentencing took place in Calaveras County, weeks after Carlson was found guilty of setting a fire decades before in 1991 that resulted in Christina's death. Christina tragically passed away on New Year's Day in 1991, trapped behind a boarded-up window in the smoke-filled bathroom of her home in California. Carl and their 3 children, including Levi, the son he would murder years later, managed to escape the fire. After Christina's death, Carlson cashed in on a $200,000 life insurance policy in her name and moved his family across the country to Seneca County, New York. 17 years later, in 2008, Carl made his son Levi work on a truck at their home in Varick. Then, in a gruesome turn of events, Carl intentionally knocked the truck off a wobbly jack, resulting in the tragic death of his own son, who was instantly crushed beneath the weight of the vehicle. And following this act, Carl once again collected a substantial $707,210 life insurance payout for his son's passing. Before facing trial for the murder of his first wife, Carlson was already serving a 15-year-to-life sentence in a New York prison for intentionally killing his son. Calaveras County District Attorney Barbara Yook has since confirmed that Carlson will be required to serve his 2 murder sentences consecutively. This means that he must complete his prison time in New York before starting his sentence in California, ensuring that he'll spend the rest of his life behind bars for these horrific crimes. Number 1. Jamanique Me. In March 2023, a tragic incident went down in Joyner, Arkansas, where a 19-year-old boy was charged with fatally shooting his father during an intense argument, as reported by the Mississippi County Sheriff's Office. Joyner, a small community with a small population of just 500 people, was shocked by the upsetting news, leaving both the neighborhood and local law enforcement in complete disbelief. Captain Preston Williams, an investigator with the Mississippi County Sheriff's Department, expressed how unexpected a crime of this nature was in a close-knit town like Joyner. The incident unfolded at about 7:30 a.m. on a Sunday morning when a woman called 911 to report a domestic disturbance. While on her way to the scene, the woman made another disturbing call, revealing that a shooting had taken place. According to Captain Williams, the tragedy had roots in an argument that had taken place the night before. The fight involved the shooter and his mother and spilled over into the next morning, leading to another altercation between the shooter and his dad, Adam Mead. During this second confrontation, the killer produced a firearm and fired shots at his father. Jamanique Me, the 19-year-old, now faces first-degree murder charges in the brutal death of his 38-year-old father. Adam Mead's brother described him as a remarkable individual who had a passion for both the outdoors and vintage cars. While details about Adam's relationship with his son are limited, it was mentioned that he had 2 other sons and 2 daughters, 5 children total. Captain Williams emphasized the rarity of such family-related tragedies, especially in rural regions. The incident still remains under investigation by the Mississippi County Sheriff's Department as they try to uncover the full circumstances surrounding this devastating event that's shaken the close-knit community. Number 19. Yarayi Salorio Rivera. 18-year-old Yanali Salorio Rivera and her daughter were fast asleep when they were shot dead in their Fresno home in October 2022. Suspicion quickly fell on Yanali's sister, 22-year-old Yarayi Salorio Rivera, and Yarayi's boyfriend, 26-year-old Martin Arroyo Morales. The couple initially denied any involvement in the double homicide, but eventually they cracked under pressure from detectives and confessed to the crime. When asked whether she meant to shoot her sister, Yarayi said yes. During a court hearing in 2023, lead detective Justin Baroni testified that the sisters had once been close friends, but their relationship soured. Yarayi also allegedly admitted that she was jealous of the attention Yanali was receiving as a new mom. Yarayi and Martin Arroyo Morales are both facing murder charges in connection with Yanali's death. In October 2023, roughly a year after the shooting, prosecutors announced that they plan to seek the death penalty against Yarayi. However, they're not pursuing capital punishment against Arroyo Morales, and at the moment, the case is ongoing. Number 18, Clare Miller. The parents of Clare Miller and her wheelchair-bound sister Helen were fast asleep in February 2021 when Clare stabbed Helen to death at the family's home in Manheim Township, Pennsylvania. She then dialed 911 in a hysterical state and confessed to the crime. Responding officers arrived shortly after 1 a.m. to find Clare standing outside covered in blood, trying to wash her hands in the snow. Helen was found dead in her bedroom with a stab wound to the neck, and Clare was charged with her murder. Prosecutors acknowledged that Clare was mentally ill and experiencing a crisis when she committed the crime, but they argued that her behavior was planned and deliberate. They also thought that she should be held accountable for her actions. The defense claimed that Clare was hallucinating and experiencing psychosis when she murdered Helen. She was allegedly hearing voices that told her to kill her sister and carried out the horrific act in an attempt to silence the commands. Clare's young age and mental health issues received limited sympathy from the judge, who ruled that the teen was mentally ill but not disabled. The judge then barred her case from being transferred to juvenile court. To avoid a trial, Clare pleaded guilty to third-degree murder in exchange for a sentence of 12 to 40 years. She will most likely see freedom again someday, and one can only hope that she's receiving some measure of psychiatric care as she serves her time. Number 17, Barry Wells. Just days after Christmas in 2017, a young mother named Toni Wells was found murdered in the basement of her brownstone apartment building in Brooklyn's Crown Heights neighborhood. Suspicion quickly fell on the 22-year-old's husband, 29-year-old Barry Wells, who'd been arrested just months earlier for allegedly strangling Toni to the point of unconsciousness and dragging her down a staircase. On the day of her murder, Toni had called the police several times and reported that she was afraid Barry was going to kill her. A pair of NYPD officers were dispatched to the residence, but they never got out of their patrol car to see what was going on inside. Both cops were briefly suspended, but managed to avoid losing their jobs, much to the outrage of Toni's family. Barry Wells was charged with second-degree murder, which could carry a sentence of up to life in prison if convicted. But more than 6 years later, the case is still ongoing. Wells remains in custody at Rikers Island, where he was busted in 2021 for allegedly bribing guards to smuggle a cell phone into the jail. In addition to the murder charge, he now faces 1 count of third-degree bribery and 2 counts of promoting prison contraband. If convicted as charged in the cell phone smuggling case, he could face up to 15 years behind bars. Number 16, Sarah Gray. In October 2019, police in Franklin, Virginia pulled up to the scene of a reported disturbance at a local residence, where they found 24-year-old Sarah Gray on top of her 27-year-old brother, Zachary. Sarah was holding the young man's chest and allegedly told officers that she had stabbed him. Zachary was rushed to the hospital where he died from his injuries. In the meantime, Sarah was taken down to the police station for questioning. She told investigators that the fight between her and Zachary began when her brother chased a vehicle she was riding in down the street while shouting obscenities at her. Not wanting to get sucked into the drama, the man driving the vehicle dropped Sarah off and wisely left the area. The altercation between the siblings quickly became physical, according to Sarah, who accused Zachary of choking her and then leaving the room. So when Zachary re-entered the room just moments later, Sarah pulled a knife from her purse and stabbed him. She claimed that she feared her brother was going to kill her. Authorities charged Sarah with second-degree murder, and there have been no further updates on the case since the story first broke. She doesn't appear to be in county lockup or state custody, indicating that the case has most likely been squared away. Number 15, Adnan Pelinkovich. The sleepy Staten Island neighborhood of New Dorp was shaken awake in October 2021 when a family fight escalated into deadly violence. 18-year-old Adnan Pelinkovich and his parents, 51-year-old Manny and 54-year-old Enver, had no prior history of domestic disputes. But a series of squabbles gave way to rising tensions between Adnan and his folks, and the Pelinkovich's strained relationship with their son eventually reached its breaking point. According to police, some of the disagreements revolved around what Adnan watched on TV, which included adult content. All hell broke loose one evening when an argument erupted between Adnan and Manny at the dinner table, and at some point during the bickering, Adnan allegedly grabbed his dad's gun and shot his mother in the chest. Manny died from her injuries, and Enver suffered a minor cut to the chest but was otherwise unharmed. He told police that Adnan had shot at him and missed, and he said that he didn't know what the teen and his mother were arguing over prior to the shooting. Responding officers found Adnan a few blocks from the home with his father's gun in hand. He allegedly admitted to shooting his mother and trying to kill both his parents, and was charged with attempted murder, assault, criminal possession of a weapon, menacing, and reckless endangerment. His mental health soon landed at the center of his court hearings, and as of early 2024, Adnan remains held in a medical unit at Rikers Island. Neighbors were shocked by the news of the gruesome crime, telling the press that the Pelinkoviches were a quiet family who homeschooled their kids and kept mostly to themselves. And unfortunately, the nature of the argument that resulted in Manny's death remains unclear. Number 14. Michael Mulgru. 69-year-old Cheryl Mulgru and her husband, 71-year-old Eugene, tried their best to help their troubled 34-year-old son, Michael. He had a history of chronic unemployment and mental health issues, and in November 2023, his parents noticed that he was becoming symptomatic. Hoping to get Michael some help, Cheryl called her local police department, which sent their mobile psychiatric emergency screening services to the family's home in Barnegat, New Jersey. By the time they arrived, Michael had left the residence on foot. Later that night, Cheryl called the police to let them know that Michael had returned home and was calm. She said that she planned to take her son to a doctor in the morning, and the conversation ended. But just 12 hours later, Cheryl called the police again and asked them to come to the house. Responding officers arrived to find blood on the front door. They noticed more blood throughout the house as they made their way to the master bedroom, where they found Cheryl and Eugene dead from multiple stab wounds, with the murder weapon nearby. Michael was found and arrested a short while later. During questioning, he allegedly admitted to being a habitual drug user and mentioned a spell of drug-induced psychosis that he'd experienced 5 years earlier while living in Vietnam. He further explained that when he left the house the day before, he believed his parents were going to hurt him. The next morning, Michael argued with his mother and father over their request for him to do chores, and the disagreement apparently sent him into a murderous rage. After killing his parents, he filled a backpack with some bottled water, a towel, and a book to read, and hid in the woods before eventually crossing paths with the police. Michael remains held without bail at the Ocean County Jail on 2 counts of murder and weapon-related charges, but we'll have to wait and see what consequences he'll receive. Number 13. Lorenzo Johnson. When a relative told 24-year-old Doris Johnson that they didn't think his girlfriend was good for him in October 2023, he lost his temper and began throwing things inside the family's Indianapolis home. He then exited the house, and the family overheard gunshots just moments after he stepped out the door. Emergency responders were called to the scene, where they found Doris lying dead on the ground with gunshot wounds. And standing nearby was the victim's 22-year-old brother, Lorenzo Johnson, who was taken into custody for questioning. During the interview, Lorenzo allegedly admitted to killing his brother, which he described as a stupid mistake. He told investigators that he followed Doris outside in an attempt to calm him down and out of a desire to protect his family. According to law enforcement, Lorenzo said that he thought introducing a gun into the situation would prompt his brother to leave, but in hindsight, he realized that he should have probably just avoided the confrontation altogether and left the property. It's too late for that now, though, and Lorenzo remains held without bond on a murder charge at the Marion County Jail. Number 12. Anthony Deella. After serving in Operation Desert Storm during the early 1990s, U.S. Navy veteran Anthony Deella was diagnosed as bipolar and schizoaffective. The upstate New York resident went on medication in 2003 and stayed on it until 2019, when he attended a healing church service and became convinced that he was cured. Not long after he stopped taking his medication, Deella became irrationally paranoid. The downward spiral that ensued took an irreversible and tragic turn in April 2022, when the then 52-year-old dialed 911 and announced that he was killing his sister, 67-year-old Wanda Paoli. During the conversation, he told the dispatcher that Wanda was a witch and that he was killing her on the porch of their home in Lyme. First responders arrived to find Wanda dead from stab wounds to the head, neck, and face. She'd been murdered using a bayonet and awl, a small pointed tool that's typically used for piercing holes. At the scene, Deella told police that he killed his sister because she was getting in the way of his communication with God. The sibling's 89-year-old mother was found unharmed inside the house, and Deella was charged with murder, assault with intent to cause serious injury, and criminal possession of a weapon. He pleaded guilty to a reduced second-degree murder charge and was sentenced to 18 years to life in prison. During Deella's sentencing hearing, his nephews, Wanda's adult sons, delivered a brutally honest victim impact statement, telling their uncle that he was nothing to them. They also said that they hope he rots in prison and never gets out. Deella was unapologetic, instead launching into a rambling rant about how he believed Wanda was going to kill their mother because she was a true crime fanatic who watched TV shows about serial killers. He said that he believed, without a shadow of a doubt, that he saved his mother's life by killing his sister. A prosecutor eventually interrupted Deella's disparaging speech, reminding the court that the purpose of the hearing was to sentence Wanda's killer, not to badmouth the deceased woman. During a jailhouse interview with local station WWNW just 10 days later, Deella expressed remorse for his actions. He was back on medication and believes that if he'd never stopped taking it, Wanda would still be alive. Deella further explained that he'd essentially lost his grip on reality by the time he decided to kill his sister. Before committing the murder, he covered his weapons with a cream containing silver to prevent Wanda from returning to life as a werewolf. At the time, the perceived need to take all these measures seemed very real to Deella, who apologized to his family members, including his nephews, and said that he hopes they forgive him someday. He also revealed that he plans to meet a woman he began corresponding with while in jail, and said he looks forward to the wedding. Number 11. Emmanuel Manny Newman. During a night of drinking at his Indianapolis apartment in December 2022, 31-year-old Joshua Hobson got into an argument with his cousin, 38-year-old Emmanuel Manny Newman. At around 2 a.m., Hobson's girlfriend drove Newman away from the residence in an attempt to de-escalate the situation. But the men continued their disagreement over the phone, and it wasn't long before Newman said that he was on his way back to Hobson's apartment to kill him. Hobson went outside to meet his cousin, despite his girlfriend's attempts to keep him inside and to keep the two away from each other. Surveillance footage would later show Newman pulling into the parking lot and exiting his car with what appeared to be a rifle. The man could be seen approaching Hobson and his girlfriend. He then shot Hobson and fled the scene in his vehicle. Sadly, Hobson died from his injuries, and Newman was charged with his murder. The suspect remains behind bars at the Marion County Jail as he awaits trial. Number 10. Candace Craig and Salia Hardy. In a horror scene that would churn the stomachs of even the most experienced investigators, 71-year-old Margaret Craig was murdered, dismembered, and grilled at her home in Landover, Maryland, in May of 2023. Police discovered the gruesome aftermath of the crime while performing a welfare check at the senior citizen's residence. Margaret's daughter, 44-year-old Candace Craig, answered the door and allowed officers to come in and look around. But immediately upon entering the house, they noticed the unmistakable stench of death. The horrifying odor led them to the basement, where they found 3 garbage bags containing body parts with blood and tissue spilled onto the floor. Evidence at the scene indicated that Margaret's killer had most likely stabbed her to death and cut her body up with a chainsaw. The culprit then tried to dispose of her remains by burning them on a charcoal grill and in a bonfire. While police were initially unsure of the motive behind the sickening crime, court records revealed that Margaret had recently accused Candace of credit card fraud. This led investigators to believe that a heated argument may have preceded the murder. Authorities believe Candace killed her mother, while Candace's 19-year-old daughter, Salia Hardy, Margaret's granddaughter, stands accused of helping to dismember the victim's body. Candace is facing a second-degree murder charge, and Salia faces 1 count of accessory after the fact, but their cases appear to be ongoing. Number 9. David Earl Johnson. In February 2020, a 911 caller who was later identified as 57-year-old David Earl Johnson reported that he had just had an incident with his cousin, 58-year-old Michael Washington, at Washington's Waco, Texas home. Responding officers found Johnson a few blocks from the residence on their way to the scene and picked him up. Inside the house, they found Washington's deceased body wrapped in a comforter with severe trauma to the back of the head. Johnson, who lived in Fort Worth but had been visiting Washington for the past month, had bludgeoned his cousin to death using a 3-pound sledgehammer. He allegedly waited 8 to 10 hours after killing Washington before calling the police. According to Johnson's version of events, Washington had threatened him with the sledgehammer, which he managed to wrestle away. He also accused Washington of threatening him with a machete and claimed that he'd acted in self-defense. A toxicology test showed that Washington had more than 2 times the legal limit of alcohol in his system at the time of his death, indicating that drunkenness may have played a role in the deadly disagreement between cousins. However, Johnson's story didn't add up to investigators, especially considering his violent criminal history, which included past convictions for attempted murder and aggravated assault. He was charged with murder with an enhancement for being a habitual offender, and in 2022, a jury found him guilty. Johnson was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 30 years before becoming eligible for parole. That means he'll be almost 90 years old by the time he even has a chance at seeing freedom again. Number 8. Stephen Woods. During the pre-dawn hours one morning in September 2023, police in Kansas City, Missouri responded to reports of a shooting at a local residence. Officers arrived to find a woman suffering from multiple gunshot wounds on the garage floor. And inside the home, they found a woman's son, 18-year-old Joseph Michael Bonacorso, unresponsive with gunshot wounds. Bonacorso died at the scene, and his mother was rushed to the hospital with life-threatening injuries. The young man's stepfather, 45-year-old elementary school teacher Stephen Woods, and his wife had gotten into a heated argument on their way home from a pool party earlier that evening. Apparently, the disagreement occurred after Woods was caught texting with another woman. After he went to sleep later that evening, his wife snuck into the bathroom with his phone and locked the door. Woods allegedly busted the bathroom door down to get his phone back, then threw his wife into the bathtub several times, and at that point, a female witness tried to intervene. The witness later told police that Woods charged at her, causing her to flee into her bedroom and lock the door. She also accused Woods of busting through her door and breaking her TV. Fearing for her safety, she called Bonacorso, who wasn't home at the time. Accompanied by 2 friends, he returned to the residence and attempted to confront his stepfather, who'd locked himself in a bedroom. Meanwhile, his friends helped his mother and the other female victim out of the house. Eventually, Woods exited the bedroom with a gun and shot Bonacorso and his mother. The suspect would later claim that he'd overheard Bonacorso making a comment about killing him, causing him to fear for his life. In an audio recording of the confrontation, Bonacorso could be heard shouting, "Are you going to shoot me like you did my dad?" at Woods. He was referencing an incident that occurred in 2016 when Woods shot his father, John Bonacorso, in what was later deemed a justified act of self-defense. But Woods was unable to explain away his more recent actions, and he failed to persuade investigators that the gun discharged accidentally. He's currently facing charges of first-degree murder, assault, armed criminal action, and unlawful use of a weapon. Number 7. Demarcus and Darcus Kohley. A holiday gathering turned terrifyingly violent for a Florida household on Christmas Eve in 2023 when a pair of teen brothers and their 23-year-old sister got into a heated argument at their grandmother's home in Largo. Demarcus Kohley, Darcus Kohley, Gabriel Baldwin, and several other family members had gone Christmas shopping earlier that day. And after returning to the siblings' grandmother's house, Demarcus got upset because he believed that their mom had bought more gifts for Darcus. As the brothers argued, Demarcus allegedly pulled a gun and threatened to shoot his brother in the head. But the young men were separated by their uncle, who removed Demarcus from the home. By that point in the evening, Gabrielle was leaving to go to work. As she walked out the door, she offered Demarcus some sisterly advice and urged him not to fight with family on a holiday. According to authorities, Demarcus hurled a slew of derogatory names at Gabrielle and threatened to shoot her, then made good on his word by pulling out his gun and firing a bullet into the young woman's chest. She died from her injuries, leaving behind 2 children who will now grow up without their mother. Enraged at Demarcus for shooting their sister, Darcus allegedly ran outside with his own firearm and shot his brother. He then threw his gun into a bush, fled the scene on foot, and called his mom. Demarcus survived after undergoing emergency stomach surgery and is now facing charges of first-degree murder, gun possession, and child abuse. Darcus was charged with attempted first-degree murder and tampering with evidence. Both brothers remain in custody, and the next step in their cases will be for the court to determine whether they'll be tried as adults. The senseless tragedy highlights Florida's ongoing problem with young people getting their hands on stolen and illegal guns. According to Pinellas County Sheriff Bob Galtieri, who described the argument over Christmas presents as a typical sibling disagreement that went terribly wrong due to the teens being armed with deadly weapons. Galtieri said that both Kohley boys are well known to law enforcement and have serious records which include previous gun charges and arrests for burglarizing vehicles just months before the Christmas Eve shootout. The sheriff remarked that gun violence among teens is the worst he's ever seen. He also said that he hopes the young defendants get locked up as an example of what others who follow in their footsteps can expect. Number 6. Kelly Tinsley. While responding to a call about an injured woman at a home in Barefoot Bay, Florida in early 2024, deputies found 69-year-old Cheryl Mura lying dead in a pool of blood just inside the doorway. She'd been stabbed to death and was covered in defensive wounds, indicating that she had fought for her life during the frenzied attack. Cheryl's 49-year-old daughter, Kelly Tinsley, was reportedly lying on a pillow in the hallway when police arrived. She allegedly told investigators that she and her mother had gotten into a physical altercation the previous evening after Cheryl made a comment about how Kelly would be a better mom if she found a bigger place to live. Tinsley claimed that her mother came at her with a knife, leading to a struggle over the weapon that landed both women on the floor. According to an affidavit, Tinsley got a hold of the knife and warned Cheryl to stop coming at her while holding the blade to the senior citizen's neck. But unfortunately, the fight ended with Cheryl dying from a stab wound. Nauseated by the sight of all the blood, Tinsley covered her mom's body with a blanket. She washed up, changed her clothes, and then lay down in the hallway. Tinsley finally called 911 7 hours later at around 5 a.m. Her claims of self-defense seemed suspicious to detectives, who noticed that Tinsley didn't appear to have any defensive wounds or cuts to her face, despite claiming that Cheryl had struck her in the mouth with the knife. She showed police some injuries to her leg and hand, which she claimed were sustained during the fight with her mother. But they weren't consistent with the type of injuries law enforcement would expect to see, based on the story Tinsley gave them about what had happened. She was arrested on one count of manslaughter reclassified with the use of a weapon and is currently being held at the Brevard County Jail as she awaits her next court date. Number 5. Gerald McDow. A family in mourning was gathered for a celebration of life event in Baton Rouge, Louisiana in April 2023 when a deadly argument broke out between siblings. 29-year-old Gerald McDowell, 27-year-old Antasia McDowell, and 18-year-old Kevanisha McDowell had just lost their 19-year-old brother, Kevin Dunn Jr., to gun violence the week before. They were selling plates of food to raise money for Dunn's burial when several family members got into a disagreement at around 10 p.m. While it's unclear exactly how the argument started, Gerald McDowell allegedly threatened to kill one of his siblings. Antasia tried to de-escalate the situation, but her efforts weren't enough to deter his attack. According to local news outlet BR Proud, Gerald was seen pulling a gun out from behind a curtain, removing the safety and opening fire on his sisters. 18-year-old Kevanisha, who'd recently become a first-time mother, died from a bullet wound to the head. Antasia was rushed to the hospital with serious injuries after being shot twice in the arm and torso. Shortly after the shooting, she reportedly said that Gerald had a history of drug use and had threatened to kill family members before, but she didn't think he was actually capable of acting on his words and was heartbroken when he did. The suspected shooter, Gerald McDow, fled the scene on foot and was captured a few days later. He was charged with murder, attempted murder, and illegal use of a weapon, and remains behind bars at the East Baton Rouge Parish Jail pending the outcome of his case. Number 4. Rolf Johnson. Late one night in August 2023, police in Lawrence, Indiana, were called to a local apartment complex over a domestic dispute. They arrived to find 27-year-old Oliver Johnson dead on the kitchen floor of his family's apartment with severe head trauma. He was clutching a wooden baseball bat, and several firearms were recovered throughout the home. Included among the weapons was a holstered handgun that was found on a cot in the living room just feet away from where Oliver died. The 911 caller, identified in court documents as Oliver's sibling, reportedly told investigators that he awoke at his own apartment nearby to a phone call from his father, 53-year-old Rolf Johnson. According to the sibling, Rolf claimed that Oliver had hit him during an argument and that he'd hit back. Acting on his father's instructions, the young man dialed 911 and headed over to the crime scene. Initial reports suggested that Rolf may have bludgeoned Oliver with a hammer, but his cause of death was determined to be a single gunshot wound. By the time police arrived, Rolf had fled in his vehicle. Luckily, though, he was arrested without incident during a traffic stop a short while later and remains held without bail at the Marion County Jail on a murder charge. Number 3. Trinel Brown. 52-year-old Clemmy Brown and his wife, 42-year-old Soretta, were shot dead in their Spanish Fort, Alabama home during an argument with their son in early 2023. According to police, 25-year-old Trinel Brown went to his parents' house on a Saturday afternoon to confront them about an ongoing family dispute. But what began as a verbal altercation turned physical when Trinel allegedly opened fire on his mother and father with an assault rifle, shooting them both several times. He then dialed 911 and was still at the scene with the gun in his hand when deputies arrived. The seemingly disturbed young man complied with law enforcement's commands and was peacefully taken into custody. Trinel faces 2 counts of capital murder in connection with his parents' death and remains held at the Baldwin County Jail amid the ongoing case. Although there were tensions in the family, there were no signs that Trinel would take such extreme measures to settle the score, leaving investigators at a loss for a motive behind the crime. Shortly after the double homicide, a sheriff's department spokesperson told Fox 10 News that Trinel had some history of mental health issues, but that he was functional enough to hold a job. A man identifying himself as Trinel's uncle claimed that his nephew had been declared schizophrenic in several places where he'd lived in the past, including Pensacola, Florida, and Mobile County, Alabama. But professionals in Baldwin County, where the shooting occurred, had concluded that Trinel was not schizophrenic. As a result, getting him proper help had proven to be a challenge. At the crime scene, deputies noticed that Trinel showed a lack of emotion and didn't appear to be upset about his parents' deaths, which sounds like a possible sign that he wasn't mentally sound. For now, the outcome of the case remains to be seen. Number 2. Gabriel Fernandez. On what began as a normal morning in September 2022, police were called to a home in Cape Coral, Florida, where they found 20-year-old Brian McKellar Jr. lying in a hallway with multiple gunshot wounds to the chest and back, and sadly he was declared dead at a nearby hospital. The young man's stepfather, 53-year-old Gabriel Fernandez, allegedly admitted to shooting McKellar during a conversation with law enforcement outside the residence. Witnesses told investigators that McKellar had tried to intervene during an argument between his mother and Fernandez, who they claimed was intoxicated. They said Fernandez lost his temper and flew into a rage when McKellar tried to make the situation his business. The terrified victim was trying to run away when he was mercilessly gunned down. McKellar's ex-girlfriend, Carolina Diaz, told WINK News that it was in his character to always do what he believed was right, no matter the cost. It was a quality that made his father, Brian McKellar Sr., extremely proud. At the time of McKellar's death, he was just a few years out of high school and had recently achieved his lifelong dream of pursuing a career in the U.S. Marines. He likely never expected that his life would be cut short when he was just starting out, and neither did his loved ones, who were overcome by heart-wrenching grief. Fernandez was convicted of second-degree murder and shooting in a dwelling and was sentenced to 40 years in prison. By the time he gets out, if he's still alive by then, he'll be in his 90s. So it's very possible that he'll spend the rest of his life behind bars. Number 1. William Stovall. A family was cleaning out the Orange County, Florida home of their matriarch following her death in October 2023 when someone asked 27-year-old William Stovall if he had his deceased elderly grandmother's phone in his possession. According to court documents, Stovall responded in a confrontational manner, saying, "You ain't getting expletive," and then turned to walk away. Instead of just leaving, however, he allegedly turned back around and pulled a gun while cursing out his relative, then fired 10 shots in his family's direction. By the time police arrived at the scene, Stovall had fled the residence. 2 people were taken to the hospital with gunshot wounds, and Stovall was arrested 2 weeks later. He was charged with 3 counts of attempted murder and 2 counts of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. However, records show that he's no longer in custody, indicating that he most likely made bail, which was set at $62,000. Let us know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.